Hello, everyone. My name is Triss. You might think that I'm just a regular girl, and maybe at one point I was. But then things took a bit of a strange turn. Truth be told, it got really complicated. Even now, I'm still trying to adapt to my new way of living. You might be wondering about the reason. Well, have you ever felt like your whole life was just one big fabricated lie? After my mom died, I discovered that pretty much summed up my life. I'll start from the beginning and you'll have to stay with me in order to understand it all. I was an only child and my mom was divorced. We both lived in a small town. Other than my friends, I had no one in this world except for her. My mom was my entire family. She was a beautiful, kind woman, but she always rejected the marriage proposals she received so she could focus on raising me. Sometimes I used to tease her saying that she had to get married eventually because sooner or later I'd go to college and she'd be left all alone, and that I'd like to have a little sister for me to spoil. And she would always say, "You're going to get a sister, don't worry." Perhaps you're wondering where my dad was. Well, I had no idea. All I knew was that he left me with my mom after the divorce, and that he never bothered to ask about me. Whenever my mom and I talked about him, she'd tell me that he doesn't exist for us. He was the one who chose to leave, my mom would explain, but she never explained to me why he decided to do that. She would always find a way to dodge my questions. My mom worked as a waitress in a restaurant. She used to work all day and sometimes all night. She was a great mom, working day and night so she could provide me with everything I needed. She promised that during the next school vacation, we'd go to Hawaii. But if you asked me, I would have preferred her working fewer shifts instead of exhausting herself like that, and that her spending time with me at home is better than any beach in this world. I always missed her so much. She was my whole world. Despite all the financial problems we were going through, I always felt pretty happy because I truly believed I had the best mom in the world and that I was so lucky. Little did I know what was about to happen to our content little life. My mom had heart disease. Every time she exhausted herself, she'd come back home and take her pills. She'd sleep next to me and hold onto my hand tightly. My mom was afraid of death, and she used to talk to me about it a lot, as if she was trying to convince me that it was inevitable and we just had to accept it. I used to worry a lot about her whenever she brought up the topic of death. I didn't want my mom to die. If she died, I'd have no one. One day we went shopping, and it was so much fun. I chose a purple dress, but my mom chose a black one for me and said, "You don't own any black dresses. Every girl must have one." So she bought it for me even though I wasn't a fan of wearing black. On our way back to the car, I heard something fall on the floor. I looked behind me and my mom was lying on the ground. At that moment, I didn't think twice before calling an ambulance. I felt as if I'd almost lost her. I started praying for her on the way, and she just stared at me and kept saying that everything was going to be all right. No need to worry. It was clear that my mom's illness was getting worse by the day. That accident didn't turn out to be that bad, but what would happen next time? Well, my prayer didn't work. One day at school, I got a call from the hospital asking me to come in urgently. My mom was having heart surgery. I left the school right away. On my way to the hospital, I could barely see. I was crying so much. Time felt like it had slowed down, and I didn't understand what was going on. That morning, my mom left the house looking fine. She didn't forget to kiss my cheek, didn't forget to put on her makeup. She looked so healthy. So what had happened? When I got to the hospital, I found my mom all ready to go in for surgery. The nurse told me that my mom had exhausted herself a lot in the last couple of days and that her heart couldn't take it. She also told me that my mom refused to do the surgery before first seeing me. Once she saw me, her face changed. She was trying so hard to keep the smile on her face. Despite all her pain, she held my hand and told me she thought her time had come, and that if she didn't survive the surgery, I should know that no one in this world loved me as much as she did. Her words shocked me. I was speechless. Before I could open my mouth, I felt her hand squeezing my fingers and she said, "This box is for you. Take it and don't show it to anyone. And always remember, even though I had a good life, it doesn't mean that I don't have my regrets." My mom went in for surgery and I almost forgot about the box. The only thing on my mind was my mom, but that didn't last long.
During the surgery, she passed away.
The following days were the worst days of my life. I was at home all alone with no idea where to go or what to do. My nice neighbor kept checking up on me, and the police were looking for my next of kin. But I was sure they wouldn't find anyone all these years, and I'd never met any of my relatives. So why would they show up now? I no longer had anything in this world except the memories of my mom. Then, one morning, my nice neighbor came to tell me that the police were taking me to an orphanage in town and that she'd also searched but hadn't been able to find any relatives of mine. So, I had to collect my things and get ready to leave. While I was packing and saying goodbye to my home, I saw my mom in every single room. When at last I entered her room, I opened her closet. There, I found the box. It was the same box my mom had given me without telling me what it contained. With everything that had happened, I'd completely forgotten all about it. I hid the box between my stuff and left. Saying goodbye to my home, the home I'd lived in my entire life, was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But I promised myself that I was going to return once I turned 18 to continue my life there. It was only a matter of time. I moved into the orphanage. I won't lie, the faces that welcomed me were kind and nice, but none of those faces were my mom's. So the place would never become home for me. My world had crumbled. I waited for nighttime to come, eager to find out what secret the box contained. I waited until everyone was asleep and fetched the box. Under my blanket, I used my phone to get some light, and then I opened the box. Here was the real shock. Had I really lived all these years without knowing that my guardian angel was nothing but a lying demon? My mom had lied to me my whole life. But why? Why would she do this to me? The money she was working double shifts to provide us with wasn't really for traveling. It was all tucked inside a little yellow envelope. On it, she'd written, "This money belonged to Mr. Jake Amberson. Please find him after my death and return it to him." Next to it, there was a small will written for me. It said, "Dear Triss, my little angel, when you read these words, I'll be in the sky looking at you from up there. Just because I'm no longer with you physically and you can't see me doesn't mean that I'm not still looking after you. Forgive me for keeping a huge secret from you, a secret that will probably flip your life upside down. And forgive me for not telling you this in person. At the end of this letter, you'll find Mr. Amberson's address. He's a relative of ours. Go to him, and he'll tell you everything. Once again, please forgive me. Love, Mom." Who was this Jake Amberson? And why should I return this money to him? Why did she never mention him before? And what is this secret that she wouldn't reveal herself? What was she afraid of? Hundreds and hundreds of questions kept spinning through my head that night. I didn't fall asleep until sunrise. I was already tired, and these thoughts just made me even more exhausted. I couldn't think of my mom the same way anymore. How could she have been so selfish? Suddenly, I had a huge urge to get some answers to all my questions, but there was no one to answer them. I wish that had been the only problem. I woke up to the sound of some girls reading the letter my mom had left me. Emily was the one who'd stolen my box. She must have heard me at night crying, or she might have seen the light from my blanket and decided to find out what I was hiding. How cruel! I hadn't even spent a whole day here, and Emily had already started bullying me. I screamed at them all to get away from my box, but they didn't. I tried to get it back, but she pushed me on the floor. My heart ached, but I didn't care. My only concern was getting back that box. While I was screaming, the supervisor entered the room. The girls scattered around the room, and they threw my box onto the floor. As for me, she took me to the principal so she could deal with the troublemaking new girl, the one who hadn't even been here for a whole day and who had already started making trouble. I held my box and went to the principal's office. I didn't know if I should tell her about Mr. Amberson or not, because my mom had said before her death to keep this between us two. I sat in front of the principal for a whole hour, listening to her as she lectured me about manners and how a nice lady should act. But the truth is, I didn't listen to anything she said. I was thinking of how I could get out of there. I decided to first get revenge on Emily. and I wasn't going to let anyone stand in my way. Perhaps if I showed her my evil side, she'd leave me alone and stop bothering me. The next day, I waited for lunchtime so we could all be in the same room. I spread some melted dark chocolate on the seat she usually sat on. As planned, she sat on it. I was dying from the moment I pointed at her pants and then proceeded to make everyone laugh at her. She stood up and I said, "Hey, Emily, still not got the hang of potty training, I see." Everyone stared at her pants and then started laughing hysterically. I loved how I turned Emily from the bully to a little joke in front of everyone. At the same time, I expected that she would find a way to get back at me, but before she could even figure out how, I'd be out of there. You might wonder, was I an evil girl? No, I wasn't. My mom and I had lived together for my whole life, but now I had to learn how to stand up for myself. No one else was going to do it for me. I didn't bother anyone except those who bothered me. Otherwise, I was a very sweet girl. After my sweet revenge, I started thinking of ways to get out of there. A whole week had passed with me trying to ignore the annoying girls in the orphanage, especially Emily, and thinking of a way to run away. I had the money and the address. All that was left was for me to get out of there. One night, I waited until everyone was asleep. I didn't take anything with me except for a small backpack. Inside it was the box. I almost got away with sneaking out of the back door until Emily started screaming, "Triss is trying to run away!" I expected Emily to get revenge on me, but what she was doing now was going to destroy me, not just annoy me. This time, Emily had won. Once again, I was taken to the principal's office. However, this time I wasn't just lectured about manners. She took my bag from me and started searching it. I screamed for her to give it back, but she paid no attention. So I started crying while hiding my face with my hands and mumbling, "There are personal things in there. My mom's personal things." But she didn't return anything to me. I felt as if she took away the only thread to finding out